Let's talk about something that causes stress for millions of us every single day: tipping. Specifically, the wild, confusing, and frankly expensive world of American tipping culture.
Does this sound familiar? I bet it does. It's this feeling that almost every purchase, no matter how small, now comes with this economic and social pressure cooker moment. This feeling has a name, you know. It's called tipping fatigue, and it is absolutely real.
And just how real is it? Well, a recent survey found that 2/3, that's 66% of Americans, now have a negative view of tipping. It really feels like the whole system is starting to crack under its own pressure.
And that's the big question, isn't it? How did we get here? How did a simple gesture of appreciation turn into this complicated, expensive, and often awkward ritual? Well, to figure that out, we have to peel back the layers of history and law.
And believe me, the story of how we got here is probably not what you think. It starts with fancy European aristocrats, but it takes a really dark turn right here in post-Civil War America. So check this out. It all started in the 1860s as a way for wealthy Americans to show off, copy the European nobles. But then, after the Civil War, it got twisted. Employers hired newly freed black workers but refused to pay them a real wage, forcing them to survive only on customer tips. Then you have Prohibition in the 20s, which wiped out bar profits, so restaurant owners fully embraced tipping to push labor costs onto you, the customer. And the final nail in the coffin? 1996, when the government basically froze the tipped minimum wage in time.
All of that history created the legal mess we're in today, and it all comes down to one single shocking number that has barely changed.
$2.13. That's it. That's the federal minimum cash wage for tipped workers, a number that hasn't gone up since 1991. Just think about that for a second. 1991.
So how is that even legal? It's because of something called the tip credit. This is a loophole that lets an employer pay that rock-bottom $2.13 an hour because your tip is legally counted as part of their duty to pay the full minimum wage. So let's be super clear. In most states, your tip isn't a bonus for the worker, it's a subsidy for the business. You are literally paying their wage for them.
And this whole system creates two completely different Americas, depending on where you live. On one side, you have states like Texas, where your tip is used to replace the wage the employer should be paying. But on the other side, you have one fair wage states like California, where employers have to pay the full state minimum wage before any tips. In those states, your tip is what it's supposed to be, a true bonus. It changes the entire feeling of the transaction.
Okay, so that's the tangled history and the legal loopholes. But how did all that lead to the awkward moment we all dread? At the checkout counter.
Oh, we've all been here. You know the drill. First, the cashier turns that iPad around. Bam! Then these huge pre-selected buttons pop up. 20%, 25%, 30%, all while the employee is watching you and the line of people behind you is watching you. It is a perfectly designed sequence to use social pressure to make you tip and tip high, even for something that never used to require a tip at all.
And this whole song and dance is so uniquely American. Here, the customer is basically expected to pay the worker's salary. But you go somewhere like Japan, and it's the complete opposite. Excellent service is just part of the job, part of their professional pride. If you try to leave a tip, it can actually be seen as an insult, like you're saying their boss doesn't value them enough to pay them a living wage.
Okay, so after all that history and psychology, what are you and I supposed to actually do in 2025? Let's break down a super practical guide to navigate these new rules.
All right, here's your cheat sheet. For a sit-down restaurant, 20% on the pre-tax amount is pretty much the new standard. But here's the one most people miss: hotel housekeeping. You want to leave a few dollars every single day, not just at the end because the staff changes. And for that dreaded coffee shop iPad, look, it's not required, but if you got great service, $1 or 10% is a really kind gesture.
But this is about so much more than just our own awkwardness or what's in our wallet. We really need to understand the deeper, hidden costs that are baked into this entire system. Just reliance on tips has some really serious consequences. Because it's so hard to regulate, it can lead to wage theft, where workers' pay still ends up below the legal minimum. It also lets customer biases directly dictate someone's income. Study after study shows that black servers consistently get lower tips for the exact same service. And maybe worse than all, that power dynamic, where a server's income depends on a customer's mood, creates an environment where sexual harassment is just way too common.
And all of this brings us to one final, really challenging question. Knowing that this system was created, in part as a way to avoid paying formerly enslaved people a fair wage, can it ever be truly fair? Or does it carry that fundamental injustice with it to this very day? It's something to think about the next time that screen flips your way.